surveillance and surveillance. So you hear things about Dr. Stephen Mann actually talks about surveillance, for example, right?
More secure than they were before, using whistleblowing facilities, using AI, and that's a project that I'm involved in at the moment, to customize ethical.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute's weekly Actionable ESG Talk series. And this time we have a special series as a roundtable with two of our amazing old friends here today. Daniel. Hi, Daniel. Sorry, my screen's kind of here. Hi, and Monique. Good to see you again.
Great to see you also. Thank you.
Yes, and both Daniel and Monique are in the ethical ESG and artificial intelligence field, and very glad to have them joining us today here. Also, our another co-host, Manuel. Hi, Manuel.
Hello, Isabella. Hello, Monique. Hello, Daniel.
Missed that part. Yeah. A little bit about just a quick title about Daniel and Monique. Monique is the president and co-founder at what is called the Humanized Internet, and Daniel is the director at Trinity Corporate Governance Lab. Again, very glad to have you both here to together discuss how the ethical practices in digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and sustainability/ESG can together evolve for a better future. A very special series today as a roundtable format, and let's get started somewhere.
Well, maybe I'll just make a quick note, but since we spoke last one-on-one, ChatGPT and all these GPT technologies exploded on in the world scene. Everybody talks about it, and I think we should add it to today's discussion also, this emergence of new technologies and how they really add to the challenges and the ethical challenges we have when we deal with machines, and how can we really take the positive part, the encouraging part, the support that these new technologies give to us, and also teach them ethics, because I don't think they really are at the point where they know anything about ethics. And maybe the question for both of you, Monique, Daniel, can ethics be even taught?
So I'll go ahead and take that, and then of course work it back to you, Daniel. Well, it's a takeaway from our last discussions, right? To parse it out. When you develop new technologies, it's also looking at what the intentionality of those technologies are. What is it you're creating for what purpose? And I think before we even launch into ChatGPT and AI, but so that's the one component. And so it's always to ask the question, I go back to what is the potential for harm and what is the potential for good, right? Potential for harm, this is polarity that is, the tension there. And I think, I believe in my own opinion is it can and should be taught. These are powerful, technologies, powerful mechanisms. And I think before people go out and start playing with them and using them, et cetera, is to understand those, that level of the potential for harm, the potential for good. Otherwise we get into these situations as we did with, what we've just heard from Jeffrey Hinton, who is the father of AI, and of course has concerns about that potential for harm, particularly also if there is the potential for good, but the potential of harm, sort of likening it to the Manhattan Project, the Oppenheimer, when people were creating nuclear weapons in the 40s. And of course, what happened was this destruction that came right through nuclear weapons. And of course, Oppenheimer was another nuclear physicist, became very, very alarmed by that. So that's my introduction, and I'll work it to you, Daniel.
Thanks very much, Monique. So I would say, as perhaps a couple of introductory remarks and response to your question, Manuel, I would say yes, I agree. Ethics can be taught, but not in the sense of understanding that everybody must go through ethical training before they can become ethical. So I think we all have sort of a fundamental sense of ethicality or morality in terms of that fundamental distinction between right and wrong, and when I talk about teaching ethics, it's more in that applied ethics sense, where we say in my field of business ethics, for example, you don't in your normal sort of ethical upbringing that people often refer to, whether that's at in the house of the parents or in the religious environment, etc. You don't get to learn about insider trading or conflicts of interest. So in that sense, yes, it can be taught. Machines cannot be taught, I would argue, and hopefully we can have some time to talk about that. This risk of using the language that, and I always struggle to pronounce the word, but anthropomorphizes technology, where we start to talk about bad machines and bad things. It's all human interventions and human design. So when we talk about the ethics and the ability to teach it and also to build it into design, it's a human activity. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, and so just as a takeaway, I absolutely agree with you, Daniel. I mean, this is contextual when we're talking about ethics. It really is contextual, and it really has multiple facets to it. And I'm totally on board with you in terms of putting sort of anthropomorphizing machines. What does ethical machine mean? Think about Siri. When you look at Siri, sort of Siri, he, she, what, it. There's this voice that's speaking to you, and so it's technology, and I think this is extremely important to lead in on that particular discussion. Yeah.
Great. Well, Manuel, anything you want to share? I know you are also very heavy on ethical issues in the technology field. You see much more than a traditional engineering mind. So what do you think about the ethics in the field?
Well, so perhaps something that Daniel's not aware of about me is that I am in the IEEE, so we talked about the International Electrical Engineers group, and so I'm actually involved in standardizing on what we call ethics in extended reality, ethics in the metaverse. The metaverse is a big field right now, so people are trying to understand what it is and agree to the nomenclature, etc. And so there was and then of course there's ethics in autonomous systems and AI. So there's a whole group of people who are coming in who are transhumanists, anthropologists, psychologists. They're coming in with various disciplines to actually look at and tackle this angle about what is ethics in these technology fields. What can it be, and how can we standardize on it? So let me give you an example. Earlier, I was on a call today. So ethics in the metaverse. So the metaverse. The questions that we're trying to pose right now is, if I'm in this twin reality field, if I'm living in this twin, people think of it as, okay, and I'm in the gaming world, but think of it as I'm in this sort of twin reality, okay, and I commit a crime. Where's jurisdictional? What is jurisdictional? How do you deal with digital justice or metaverse? I'll call it metaverse justice for the moment, okay. So there are examples, and I think you let in Manuel with talking about connected car and those issues, but we're actually going in a little more deeper. So there have been situations where a woman has been gang raped within this metaverse, twin digital, or if you want to call it digital reality, because it is a reality. So and actually, how do you deal with harms at that level? So that's harm issue. I know we're kind of straying away from ethics, but we have to think about it in the terms I look at the world, and I'm in the world I'm in. And so, how do you deal with digital justice, how does that, for example, impact education? So could you think about a metaverse lawyer? Could you think about studying computer science and artificial intelligence and some type of metaverse or digital reality law? I have colleagues in Switzerland who are actually AI lawyers. They are lawyers. They have a legal degree and they're dealing with jurisdictional issues around artificial intelligence, something that we talked about before. And so those are the kinds of, that's the worlds that I've lived in. So there's the standardization area. There's the area that you have in the world I live in specific to extended reality or multiple realities or digital realities, and now so-called sort of the metaverse. And then, and that's through IEEE, but also there are other areas that we're kind of looking at, posing the question is, are we thinking about this world in a different way? Are we thinking about justice in a different way? Are we thinking about harm in a different way? And so those are the types of, that's the type of world I'm living at. So I'll stop here because it's important to hear from my colleagues.
Being a medical engineer by training, I see the reality as a construct. At least the latest brain research shows that we construct our reality. There is not such a thing as absolute reality. It's a mix of physical and mental models. And actually, I wanted to turn it to Daniel a little bit, and starting with that, and knowing that he's working a lot with executives, with heads of the industries, as well as you doing, Monique, by the way. How can we use these machines to give proper advice, right? Because at a certain point where you can say, well, the AI system told me to do so and so, fire half of my people, which did already happen in certain industries or in certain case. How we deal with that, Daniel?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, Manuel, to perhaps again just take one step back, and it is important to, I think, to talk a little bit about the terminology, because we have this, I think, understandable focus on AI at the moment as a result of ChatGPT and the things that are happening. And by the way, the other big issue in education in terms of AI is assessment that we're dealing with at the moment. How do we know now, when students submit their assignments? I'm busy grading at the moment, that it was not, generated by ChatGPT, because Turnitin doesn't pick it up anymore. It's not plagiarism in the traditional sense, because it's an original work generated by AI. But we also, I think it's useful to think about this term that is used of frontier technology. So it's not only AI, but also things like blockchain, and in more general, sort of coming back to the context as well. You mentioned the metaverse, social media and how people interact with us. So it goes much broader than simply AI, but I think for understandable reasons, as I said, that is the core focus at the moment. In terms of the work that I've done, and I have to add immediately that I'm not an AI expert. I'm not even a technology expert. So I'm in the world of ethics, and I'm trying to work my way into sort of thinking a little bit about these issues. It's useful to make that distinction between technology, and again, I use it in its broadest sense here, as a tool that can advance integrity. And then to flip that on its head and to say, but there's also the technology itself that has some very interesting and challenging ethical issues. So on the one hand, you have technology applied to advance ethics, and then at the same time, the technology can be subjected to ethical inquiry and to say, is this ethical, yes or no? And then, go into some of the things that you've alluded to, where machines make decisions about HR and firing people or screening them for appointments, etc. Then we get back to the to that ethical dimensions, and we did some research, and I'm happy to to go into a bit more detail, if you like, about from the academic point of view, what some of the the latest focus areas have been in terms of understanding those the ethical components attached to technology. But in the world of executives, I think most of them are interested in the former question. How can we use technology to advance integrity? And that's where you get, for example, procurement systems, or using blockchain to make sure that tender procedures are more secure than they were before, using whistleblowing facilities, using AI, and that's a project that I'm involved in at the moment, to customize ethical training programs. In other words, to personalize at a scale that wasn't possible before big data and specifically AI. So again, broad strokes, but those are some of the issues that I think are really interesting and deserve more attention.
And so from this end, yes, I agree. I'm looking at a broad base of technology. So I am in that blockchain world and tokens world and et cetera. And by the way, sustainability, so planets, we have one planet now with the energy you can use. So think about it, Metaverse reality, you get an indicator that states how much energy you're using. And then of course you can actually tokenize it and so on and so forth. You can create solutions. So the idea is and as I understand what you deal with at the executive level as with industries, there's the integrity component of it, but it's also solutions that are created that can be fostered and used. And so I do believe that there is the power of the and here. Having said that, so I do think that it's not to, and let me be very clear, it's not that we, sometimes the world is so painted in a dystopian way. We're not at a dystopian world here. It's to understand what is we're dealing with at one end of the spectrum. And if you're talking about jobs, well, Screenwriters Guild, I think, in Hollywood are on strike because they do fear that the use of these technologies could take their work away. And so if there is this concern about work and professionals and people losing their jobs, let's take that angle. What does it mean to upskill, right? What does it mean to pivot to new skills where it's never too late to pivot to new skills? That's one area that we have to pose that question, because I think we're always going to be learning. I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm now going to. I can confess that I'm at the very, very, very beginning of PhD in cyberpsychology. So this is a new discipline, and wow. Isabella and I talked about that. Mm-hmm. So I think that what we have to think about is that pivot. What does that mean? And if we're talking about ChatGPT in particular, there's already sites that talk about ChatGPT for kids. So they're already extending it to kids to learn, right? So these sets of technologies. Now, the question is, you embrace this. How do you embrace these technologies such that they're not threatening to you, but understand, what the polarities and the angles that we're dealing with, and at the same time, to Daniel's, earlier intervention stating that, when you take exams, you didn't actually use ChatGPT for that, right? Well, okay, if you use ChatGPT, I can see this through some of the master's programs. People are looking at, okay, you don't have much time to go back to your question because they're thinking, am I using ChatGPT to actually find the answer? But the question is, what does that do with our ability to think? Where's that human possibility here to think on our own? So that's why I had, there's the Humanized internet. Where's that human in the in this whole loop? And so to be able to think and to pose those questions and to kind of take a step back and, pose the questions out loud without going to, having a conversation with a technology that basically scans very quickly what is detectable on the internet, quote unquote, and then sort of pays it back to you, right? And so, which is, is that original? So it's something to think about.
Going back, Daniel made an offer which I cannot refuse to lift a little bit the lead on his research. So maybe Daniel, complementing what Monique had said and how this relates to your research as well.
Oh, thanks, Manuel. So what I did was to simply look at sort of a mini literature review, if you like. So I looked at sort of top-end academic journals over the last 7 years, and with a sort of a search of keywords like ethics and AI, try to explore what are the what are the academic contributions about in the field. And we looked at the ABIS journal list and only at 3- and 4-star journals. Majority of those, interestingly enough, came from MIT Sloan Management Review. So there's a clear focus, in that journal on these issues. But then I analyzed all the abstracts, and about 57 of those articles looked at the issues that they addressed. I think it was no surprise that privacy came out as as sort of the number one issue that would be addressed. But then I tried to dig a little bit deeper, and through a bit of an analysis came up with what I regard as 3 tensions that I see in the themes of what people are writing about. So the first one is the tension between the right to privacy measured against demands for transparency. And we can see that technology can do both. So on the one hand, through blockchain, for example, we can have incredible levels of privacy, that would allow people, to post certain things or design things in such a way that their privacy is guaranteed. But on the other hand, there is also demands for transparency. And one of the things discussions that I was involved in the B20 last year, and it surfaces all the time, is this idea of registers for beneficial ownership, where you say, we need transparency in terms of who owns companies, because money laundering, terrorist financing, etc., can all be sort of used against. And of course, that's the other thing that perhaps one should have said at the beginning, is that technology is always a double-edged sword. So just as you can use it to advance integrity, so the forces of evil can use it to advance their cause. So it's always going to be this battle between good and evil. So that's the first tension: right to privacy against the right to transparency and the right to information. The second one was freedom of speech and the right to human dignity. And this is one that plays out specifically in discussions about social media, and more specifically Twitter. And I see that Twitter is in the news again. I was approached earlier for comment about what the impact could potentially be of the new CEO of Twitter. But you have that tension as well. So on the one hand, we say that we want to use technology to allow people to say whatever they want, but then there's also the requirement to protect the dignity of individuals and say only up to a point. And then there will be, like many other components of business ethics, I think we also then will make the distinction between what is legal and what is ethical. So yes, there's always going to be a legal requirement in terms of hate speech, for example, or things like that. But there will always be gray areas as well, where people engage in what sometimes referred to as the lawful but awful activities, where you don't transgress a law, but you still impact on the dignity and the ethics of morality of others. So that's the second one: freedom of speech versus dignity. And the third one, and I think this is where AI then specifically would come in, is freedom of choice versus autonomy. So we want to, as human beings, say that we have freedom of choice. We like to believe, and this is where we come back to the constructed reality discussion to some extent, that we want to make the final decision, but when the algorithms feed us, the wish lists and the things that they think we should see, or that other people who develop the algorithms think that we should see, then our autonomy is actually eroded, and we start, becoming slaves to the machines, to use that type of language. that our autonomy is eroded. So those are the three: right to privacy versus transparency, freedom of speech versus dignity, and freedom of choice versus autonomy. And I think if you look at most of the academic contributions that have been published over the last number of years, they would always fit into at least one of those three.
So yeah, and I think so excellent. I love the number 3 because you can memorize 3, right? So,
yeah, the magic number.
And you've broken that down. So I'm going to be very keen on your research.
There were 3 polars, Monique, so there were 6 actually.
Yes, exactly.
It's a of hand there.
Exactly. But privacy is one that I think is really much talked about at the moment, because it's this polarity on having surveillance or surveillance. So you hear things about Dr. Stephen Mann actually talks about surveillance, for example, right? So there's this whole thing about what does that mean in terms of using technologies, especially from his perspective. He's into wearables. He's actually an individual has been very much in this space, but surveillance. And so surveillance is really, really key here. That's a balancing act. The question's often posed, do you forget about privacy overall? You say it's already dead. But then what are you surrendering your privacy to, right? Why do you close your windows at night? Why do you do certain things that you... So these are the things, what does privacy, again, being contextual, mean to you? And so if you say privacy is dead, to what are you surrendering your privacy? So it is you could say it's your human right. It's your right to privacy. We can say that, sort of quote, can couch it that way. But again, it's a really strong discussion. And then, of course, when you think about transparency, that's another level about, okay, who's using these technologies? As I said in the first discussion that we had, the very, very early adopters of these technologies are the very people you're trying to protect yourselves from. Right? So, if you think about what's happening on the dark web, etc., very quick. Very quick. This is the thing about transparency and what transparency get. Would you say do transparency means what to you? Daniel, you worked with executives. How many of them share their salaries? How many of them share? What does transparency mean exactly? So that has to be contextual in a business perspective. And then, of course, then you're looking at actually how do you deal with what is truth in social media? Again, being contextual. Think about what's happening. We're having elections. Wherever you're having elections, what is truth? And so truth will be again coming from whichever is your favorite social media platform, and that is where truth is fed up to you. So and that is what we're dealing with today. And I do believe that we're going to have to think about ways of using these types of discussions to actually share our research that particularly Daniel has has done at Trinity. From a business perspective, and also what IEEE is doing from an ethics perspective, to share that to the public more.
I would like actually to give also a little bit of time to Isabella. I called her activity.
I'm supposed to moderate. Malan took the seat.
Yes, Isabella.
Yes.
Step in. You definitely have a point of view.
The rules are made to be broken, right? So, we discussed previously. I call your activities really the activities of a social futurist. So, taking the points that we got from Daniel and Monique, any glimpse at the future? Is it going to be what we are afraid of? What we hear today, is it noise and maybe the machines will work with us? Or as Jeffrey was saying, will work against us. They will network and decide that humans are, costly and not very user-friendly, and machines will get rid of us. So what do you see, you can look at the future a bit?
Yeah, when I was listening to Daniel and Monique, I can just feel like there's just so much things that we can address in this field. Like it's just we're not even close to name every single thing. Daniel was mentioning on a corporate level and how to even use AI for good, right? For the ethics to improve our integrity. And Monique was in the metaverse space, the virtual space, combined with our physical world, how we define truth in our world and things like that. You can just see how broad this conversation, I just feel it right away. And I couldn't manage to even connect them because every single of them is very important. And how do we, take a order like one by one, which one is more prioritized than the other one? I can't say it. And from maybe a social perspective, because that's what I'm very into, I always see things in a more holistic way. The reason can explain this is probably when we introduce something new, and in this particular scenario, right, a technology, we're also introducing a new set of a new class of responsibilities and even ecosystem. So everything changed. There has to be a new set of rules for everything. And where do we start? It's really worth discussing. And from a social perspective, the reason we're having so many problems now in ethical field, in almost everything we're dealing with today, is this attention economy leading by the tech giants. They're taking a charge to maximize the engagement by, in a way, manipulating our behaviors to monetize on top of it. And this just leads to every single discussion that we could have, including today. There's a number which is not a secret, but we don't pay attention to it. It's estimate, but it's like 90% of the company now are racing to deploy a new technology, a new AI innovation. And probably only 10% of the companies are the discussions. It's about the ethics, or what are we actually doing? What consequence, are these technologies are bringing to us. So you can see this imbalance and severe imbalance, that itself is a huge problem already, because everything happens so fast. We want to race to just, to create more things instead of thinking about what we're really doing. So things like that, it's just hard for anyone to see what's really going on. And I just came across a very interesting quote, and I think it says a lot of our situation. It's by Dr. Edward Wilson. He's a sociobiologist, and he said we have Paleolithic emotions and medieval institutions and a godlike technology. That's literally where we are right now. And I'm sure all of us can see where we are right now. It's such an interesting place, and all this misalignment, dangerous misalignment, I would say, between our emotions and our current institutions and the technology power combined.
We have only a limited amount of time. Please, Daniel, and then I have one more question.
Okay, thanks, Manuel. I just wanted to go back to what I mentioned earlier, and I actually misspoke because we were talking about privacy, and even though privacy features very highly in terms of the research that we did, the one theme that came up as number one was not privacy, but it was trust. And I think that makes a lot of sense also, going back to what you've said, because if you think about those tensions, they all relate to trust. And in terms of getting the balance right between, for example, privacy and transparency, or freedom of choice and autonomy, once you get the balance right, then the result of that will be trust of people who use the technology, and who are impacted by the technology within those different societal sort of contexts. And I think, again, that is then why regulation is going to become increasingly important, because this is a new reality. And in a sort of complex world, you will have to find new and innovative ways also to regulate this. And then just one other quick comment, going back to what Monique said earlier, and then I'll stop, was on the issue of transparency. And I take your point absolutely. Some people probably, if they really earn a lot of money, they will boast about it and want other people to know about it. But there is a reluctance to share sometimes. But that's also where technology again comes into play. And there's this wonderful case study that we looked at that was initiated at MIT called Integrity Distributed, where in the anti-corruption space, a lot of companies were able to share data, underlying data, but through technology that didn't allow anybody else to identify where it came from. So they were able to be transparent, but at the same time, they protected their own privacy. So again, I think technology opens up interesting new possibilities there.
Yeah, trust is so, if I may, Manuel, to sort of intervene, I have to totally agree. Trust is so important. You trust that things will work. You trust that the solution is correct, if you want to say correct or use that term again. It's contextual. You trust. And I think that's really important, that has impacts to the brand, brand. So think about what happens when something negative occurs in a company. It really impacts the brand, and people talk about it, and there were cases in the industry where we can, could be cited where there were problems and there were issues, and people, the trust in that brand was eroded. So something that is very, very key. And Isabella, you wonderful interjection and intervention that you had there in terms of summarizing some of the conversations that we're having, and actually thinking about medieval institutions, which is really kind of where we're at, is this sort of this notion of a medieval institution, but institutions, and so everything is sort of creaking, and that is the thing. We're at this this fork that there is a tectonic shift that's occurring, and it's been occurring. We just haven't been aware or conscious of it. Some of us have, but it has been occurring. And the last comment I will make before handing it back to you, Manuel, back to Daniel, is yes, regulators will need to come in, but they have to have a certain background. You cannot come in and think that you're going to regulate if you do not understand a little bit of the aspects here. You don't have to be a total technologist. You don't have to be, but you have to be cogent enough to be able to know where you need to tap into those who are deep in certain areas before you start the regulation process, because otherwise we could stymie innovation, quote unquote, and we would be maybe regulating areas that were not intended to be regulated in the first place. So that's the foundational comments that I wish to make.
Going a little bit around the question of trust and so on, can I trust myself now that the technology can change my biases? It can change even, immersive technologies can change my reality, my construct of reality, right? Adding to it, subtracting to it, and I'm not in control of that. So is it a point where should we include technology in the trust circle, or sort of keep it at bay with regulations, with laws, with safeguards? And this is maybe the final question for today's panel, but I'll definitely look forward for a follow-up as soon as possible.
Well,
yeah,
I mean, go ahead, Daniel.
Okay, just very briefly on that, and then I'll hand to you, Monique. It's a really good point, Manuel, but I think that you can never trust yourself in the sense that that you live in a sort of world where we would say pre-technology we could, because it's always constructed reality. Propaganda 100 or 200 years ago could have had exactly the same effect that technology has now. So again, I think we should remain sort of realistic about sort of this new context, and not throw away the baby with the bathwater in terms of what we learned before and what we can what we know about human behavior and decision-making processes and autonomous thought, etc. So it's a new context, but some of the fundamentals remain the same. And final other comment from my side, just to link up with what Monique said about the regulations, I fully agree with that. And I think one should also just extend that in a corporate environment, again, to boards of directors as well. If directors don't have that basic fundamental knowledge, not detailed knowledge, not technical knowledge necessarily, but if you don't have that at board level, then in an ESG world, you're going to struggle.
Well said, Daniel. And I think trust is, again, do you trust yourself? Well, it's contextual once again, but I will say this is that we have to be careful what trust means, trusting yourself. I always think about it as living in a filter bubble. So, we have to be careful of this gets into a filter bubble sort of phenomena. And that's why it's important to actually expand our knowledge a little further. And I'm not ever going to say, I trust myself. I trust, the whole notion of trust me. I know. I just don't want to say that. Trust me, it's transparent. No, you have to put it's got to be fact-based at the end of the day. And when you don't know, I like to understand things that I don't know. I just don't know, but I will try to look it up, right? To keep it very simple. And I think that's, and I do believe in Occam's razor, simplicity is going to be our best friend at the end of the day. If we can do that, because there's a lot of complexity that we're dealing with at this point in time. And so we have to be able to distill it to something that people can, from a business perspective, clearly understand what the implications are: trust, transparency in the business and to the brand, and also thinking about, in the end, it's accountability and responsibility. So that are the other aspects that we have to have as part of this conversation with executives, and as well as with regulators and educators.
Well, as I mentioned, I hope we meet again very soon. The scope and the size of the topic cannot be, served and done justice with a short roundtable. But I hope we expand our roundtables and we bring more experts together with you to debate this kind of really seminal and, I would say, crucial issues to our development as a society and as a human ecosystem. Right? We talked about sustainability, but very briefly. Isabella, back to you.
I'm so happy we had this I'll say a jumpstart conversation on this topic right here, and I'm sure it's definitely going to be ongoing, and happy to again have both of you back. I think we can have a 12 season, something like that, topic series on this topic. So much to discuss from different angles. Thank you two so very much, and thank you, Manuel, for moderating for me and give me the small opportunity to share a little bit. And thanks to all of our audience again for tuning in. And you guys are more amazing, even in a sense, than us, by, supporting us and listening to the truth of what's really going on in today's world, and to see what are the opportunities and the potential risks in the field of ESG sustainability and technology development in digital transformation field. So thank you all, and make sure you're tuning in for the next one, and I'll see you all very soon. Thank you. Bye, Monique. Bye, Daniel.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.